Hello and welcome to the Origins of Islam. Today we want to finally have a look at some actual manuscripts and see if the theory that we've created over the last couple of episodes can be verified. So let's pick up where we ended last time. We've created this beautiful picture which makes a lot of sense, but at this point it's still only a theory. So is there a way of proving the theory right? Well, one cannot prove a theory. At most, we can verify it to a high degree of certainty. And how do we do that? By looking for specific predictions which necessarily follow from the theory. For example, if you think about Einstein's theory of special relativity, initially when he published it, it was just a theory. But of course it already garnered a lot of interest because it made a lot of sense. It made sense of the observations that were already made. But in order to prove it, people looked at specific predictions. One such prediction was that when the planet of Mercury passes by the sun, it should appear to be in a different place due to the light bending around the sun. So in order to test that, people waited for the next solar eclipse and they sent an expedition which observed Mercury, and indeed Mercury turned out to be exactly where Einstein predicted it and not where previous theories would have predicted Mercury to appear. We can do something similar with the Koran. To do so, we are looking at the Codex Parisino Petropolitanus. This is one of the oldest surviving manuscripts and certainly the oldest ones that contain some of the verses that are relevant to us. So today we want to start with folio 10v. V stands for verso, which means the backside of the folio. A folio is a piece of parchment, typically with writings on both sides of the page. Now folio 10v of this Codex Parisino Petropolitanus has 21 lines of text, which is average for this manuscript. This folio also contains part of Surah 4. Verse 12 spans from line 12 to 21 and continues on the next page. We can clearly see signs of a secondary layer put on much later than the original text, roughly 2 centuries later. In line 3, the editor added a different verse separator. In lines 14 to 21, he redrew letters that were fading away. Unlike the original script, the editor's letters are thinner and upright instead of slanted to the right. So he is using what is called the Abbasid bookhand script, which is different from the Hijazi script which the original text has. But there's one word in particular which we want to look at in more detail, the word kalala in line 18, which as it happens played a crucial role in our reconstruction of the original Quranic verses. Looking at it more closely, we can see that the word kalala did not fade. It was actively scratched out by the editor. The letter kaf is a mixture of the editor's layer and the older layer. What we can see is that this letter kaf here goes across the entire height of the line. But in the Hijazi script of the original writer, the kaf would only occupy less than half of the line. So here I've put in an example from the same folio where we can see the kaf of the original writer. Here. And as you can see, it doesn't go along the whole height of the line. It is narrower and it does not have the long diagonal line going up. So let's zoom in even more and compare the kaf-lam combination of the edited part with the unedited part from the other side of the same folio. We can see a second letter lam which was scratched out by the editor. Here used to be a lam. The underlying kaf-lam-lam combination is unusually tightly squeezed. From that we can tell that there was a first editor editing the original Hijazi style script, likely the original scribe himself. The metallo-gallic ink used by the scribe is corrosive, so if one holds the parchment against the light and looks through the reverse side, one can see the original pen strokes. Unfortunately, this does not translate onto this digital image, but what we find is that originally there was a kaf followed by one lam. Shortly after the manuscript was produced, the second lam was added in place where the original kaf was, forcing the first editor to move the kaf to the right, squeezing everything in. Then, approximately 2 centuries later, the second editor came in, scratched out the entire word as it was difficult to read with the corrections, reusing the added lam for a kaf in his more modern style, which simultaneously unsqueezed everything. So that is why this letter kaf has the diagonal line going back to the original script, even though in the original script the letter kaf wouldn't look like this. That is because it was a letter lam, which was repurposed as a letter kaf by the second editor. The second editor then squeezed in 2 tightly spaced letter lums after the kaf to make up for the lost space. Those are the 2 lums here. What that means is that we can conclude that originally Surah 4:12 did not include the word kalala, but kalla, with only 1 lum. As predicted, this verse originally spelled out inheritance rules for daughters-in-law, because daughter-in-law in all the different Semitic languages are called kalla. This also solves the question regarding the missing word kalla in the Arabic language. The second lam was added later, creating an artificial word kalala, which was then interpreted to mean collaterals. So let us look again at this chart from the previous episode, and we can see that originally we did have the word kalla, and it did mean daughter-in-law. The Codex Parisino Petropolitanus proves as much. That means that 2 of the predictions which our theory made have now been verified. We've seen that originally Surah 4:12 contained the word kalla, which means daughter-in-law. It was revised later on already by the first scribe, who added a second lam, turning the word kalla into kalala, which then leads to the revision of Surah 4 verse 12. In the next episode, we will conclude our observations of the Codex Parisino Petropolitanus, which will show beyond the shadow of a doubt why and how the Quran was changed. Until then, thank you very much for watching and see you next time.